Hello.
Oh, hey.
Welcome to Chronicles of the Phoenix. You're back.
I'm back.
I've missed you so much.
I missed you too.
Aaron was away in Europe on an amazing trip.
Trip of a lifetime. It was incredible.
What was your favorite part?
Oh my gosh. I had so many favorite parts. I think it was just getting to experience different cultures and getting to see the diversity of the people and experiencing the world with my children. And, one of the other things that was really cool was we became the students to my kids because we immersed ourselves in history. We went to London and Paris and did all of the tourist attractions and stuff. And I have to say, Waterford Public Schools has done right by my children because they were very knowledgeable. And my daughter learned about the French Revolution this last year. So
she had it all in her noggin?
Louis the 15th and Louis and Marie Antoinette. We learned all about them. And Addie, she just gave us all the information. And Hayden had a bunch of information about the American Revolution. And
isn't it wild what they know? And you wouldn't really ever know they know this stuff because why would it really come up necessarily unless you're asking? I remember feeling the same way at the Louvre with Griffin. He was he knew the oldest piece and what it was and what it said. And we had to go find it, which was hard to find. But I'm how did you, why do you know that information?
Yeah.
I would never know that information.
Well, that's the thing. Their retention, I think, is way better than my retention ever was. And and also, can we talk about how enormous the Louvre is? I feel like you could spend a month in the Louvre and still not see everything.
Oh, totally. It's huge, and we tried to get through as much as we could, but in the end, we know we missed, I think, at least half of it or more. Yeah,
and I was so overwhelmed by the number of people in there, and I know that they still limit the number of people they let in, but the amount of people that they do let in is still.
Did you find the Mona Lisa to be small?
Yes,
it's tiny,
so small, very unimpressive, and they're very aggressively protect it. We didn't want to wait in line to get up close because it didn't feel necessary to me. So we went on the side and they were keep it moving. They aggressively wanted you to be you can't take pictures from the side. If you want to take a picture, you got to be head straight on. So
wow.
Yeah. But no, it was Notre Dame was I got emotional in Notre Dame.
It's gorgeous.
And you do feel I don't know, I felt so connected to my spirituality and
old it is.
How old it is, the fact that it took 100 years to build. And, I don't know. It's a special place for sure. I think one of the other things was to the catacombs. First of all, the way they set up that museum is very cool. You have headphones on, and as you're moving through, they narrate it in the story of the person that built the tunnels and stuff. So it's a very well done design of the way they educate you throughout the museum. And it was just, it's eerie, right? But it's also, I don't know, it was an incredible experience to kind of go through that. So I think that was one of the ones I'll take away. One of my favorite things in London was biking through Hyde Park. Which was hilarious.
Yeah.
It was the largest pride parade that I've ever seen in my life, which was amazing. And it was 6 hours long. So we were on our bikes and we were trying to traverse back to our hotel on the bikes. And the boys were much more comfortable biking through all the humans and traffic. Addie and I were a little bit less comfortable. And I finally was I don't think this is the best decision for us.
Maybe we shouldn't be trying to do this.
Maybe we should go back on foot. So
hey, sometimes you got to figure it out. I think that's wild that you were there for that. That's how I felt when we were there for the marathon in Paris. It was the Paris Marathon. And that's the day we showed up trying to navigate through the city. Everyone was you're not going to get anywhere around there. You can't. And then we had to run across the street with our luggage through the runners. What are we doing? But it's just this is what you do.
Yeah.
How cool. But yeah, I love that you got to go to both places. It sounds like everyone had such a good time.
Yeah, everybody got along well.
How did your travel skills play out for you? We've talked a lot about Enneagram and travel. You said this for me, and we kind of caught up on my 9-ness. What did you think?
So, I didn't go with my super lackadaisical, we're going to go at the last minute. I was a little bit more on the earlier side. But everything worked out beautiful. And we flew Virgin Air on the way there, which was the first time I've ever flown that. And it was lovely. And we flew Aer Lingus on the way back, which was super fun. And hearing your pilot have an Irish brogue was like probably one of my favorite things.
Sounds amazing.
It was pretty great. I did heed your advice in the Paris airport and got there very early. And what I will say is that I've never experienced anything like the Paris airport. And the fact that you have to go through like 4 different sections before you even get through to security, it seemed like, is insane. And it gave me a lot of respect for my parents who fly internationally and have to navigate with disabilities. Like, as able-bodied people that are going through, maybe it's because I have pre-check, I don't ever think about putting things in clear bags anymore, like liquids. I don't ever take out my electronics.
Yeah.
And then when we get to the Paris airport and they're like, oh, here's your clear plastic bags. You're going to need to take all the liquids that you neglected to take out and put them all in your plastic bags and all your... I was like, oh, so we were those people.
You're digging through the suitcase.
Ridiculous. And then we had to put all of our stuff back together. And then we flew through Dublin, so we had to do it all over again when we went through.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And then the hotel we got in Paris was an interesting experience because there wasn't any person. We just got texted a key code to get into the hotel and then a hotel room and then a passcode to get into the room. But I didn't realize any of that was happening. And when I called the hotel, it instantly went to a text message. So then my husband had a bit of fear that we were being scammed. So then I had a fear. So there's a little brief moment that I didn't think I had a hotel. And then we realized that, nope, Hotel Sol Moray was a wonderful place. Their idea of air conditioning was really moving air with 2 fans.
Yes, of course.
But they had lovely windows that opened, so you could move air and have airflow through open windows. And it's not super buggy, so it was fine. So it was a different experience in terms of I never once saw anyone that works there other than the cleaning people.
Different than different kind of customer service or luxury.
Very much so.
Different
very narrow spiral staircase, so getting your luggage up or down.
You had to be strong. I think you guys are all strong.
Very strong. So yeah.
Especially Brian. I saw those pictures of him holding everyone up for the Eiffel Tower. It's a big one.
Yeah. I don't usually let him do that. That was a special occasion.
I mean, I am very glad he was right about that. That should have definitely happened. It's memory you'll never forget.
That's right.
Well, it seems like you guys had the best time. I'm really happy you're back, but I'm really glad you got to do that.
It was wild here, too. The weather was crazy.
The weather was crazy. We had storms, trees falling, power outages. You missed a whole bunch. My owl, Gregory, who came to visit for a day and then passed away, sadly, with the rescue place I got him hooked up with.
It's very nice that you tried to help him.
I did. I tried to help him, and it probably was too little too late, but he spent his last night cozy and warm and well hydrated. So I feel like it was the right thing to do, but it was a sad moment.
That is a sad moment.
Shall we?
Let's do it. So what are we talking about today?
We are going to be talking about the parts of ourselves we leave out. Authenticity, connection, and how relationships change as we do. I think we kind of came up with this topic thinking about our last conversation with Molly and Cojourn and understanding the different intersections of, goal setting, connection, like the importance of connection. And I know our favorite terminology that came out of that episode was social snacking.
Yes. Have you been snacking?
I have been. I actually very intentionally been thinking about how to socially snack, like out in public, because I'm not a social snacker normally. I'm a stare at my phone, don't interact with people sometimes person, which isn't always in my personality, but I feel like that's just my go-to. Like I'm kind of in the zone and I don't love that quality. And so this has felt like a really nice way to just, I've been making it a point to like compliment people on things that I see. Like when I went to Starbucks this morning, I told the barista that I loved her tattoo.
Ooh.
And I would just never do that stuff. Like I would think it, but I'm just not one to put it out there.
Sure.
So I feel like very introverted in that moment. So that's what I've been doing. Have you socially snacked at all?
I mean, I think I probably naturally socially snack.
You're a good social snacker.
Yeah.
You're a way better social snacker than me in general. I already know this.
Yeah.
Big conversation with anybody. You're very comfortable. You talk to people that you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. My kids always comment on that. I don't know that I have been as consciously thinking about it maybe as you have. I definitely do that pretty regularly, I think.
Yeah. So I think we've been having an awareness since that conversation of like what connection looks like and how there are many different ways that we see connection. And I think we had this interesting moment where the two of us reconnected just with you getting back and, you know, seeing your clients again and the clients I've been seeing in the time you were away. And now that there's been some themes around kind of our own disconnection with ourselves. And I know this is a topic we've talked about when we think about burnout and other things, right? It's sort of we separate ourselves from others, but we also kind of check out. And so one of the things I think we wanted to think about in this conversation today is this question on how are we able to be deeply connected to others if we're disconnected from parts of ourselves? We know what it feels like when we don't have that connection or if we feel lonely. We've talked about like feeling lonely, but yet being around people, you're sort of disconnected and checked out. And so even when we have friends, family, coworkers, partners, communities, like we don't always feel seen. And I think what we wanted to think about today and process is the way that our own internal disconnection leads us to feel lonely and maybe inauthentic at times. And really the integration helps us move forward in our lives, but then also shifts our relationships. So when you think about that, have you ever realized that different groups of people know completely different versions of you?
Yeah, you know, I've thought about that a lot through the years, to be honest with you. I felt like people at work definitely knew a version of me versus my family knew a version of me versus friends knew a version of me. And in some cases, I felt like as I evolved and grew, like I think as a child, my family knew the most authentic version of me because I felt the freest to be my authentic self at home as a child. But I think as I grew and developed and became an individual that was separate from my family and my values and individuation happened that was separate from my family, and we all like lived in different parts of the country and weren't a daily part of each other's lives any longer. I think that I started to become more comfortable being my most authentic self with friends. And they knew me better than I did, which was an interesting reflection. And a lot of times those were my work friends because I spent the most time with them, and they were the people that I was developing like these deep connections with and values and learning. And you know, I think in the work that we do, you have to do so much self-reflection, and there's a lot of introspective work that you do and in connection to like be effective. So, and you're doing pretty intense work with your clients. It's trauma work, so you need a place to like process the trauma and tragedy that you're holding space for.
Right. So when you think of connection, like we think of connection being built on that vulnerability, on like the emotion that we have, it does allow for the creation of those deeper relationships, I think, especially in this field.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think about that, like with the military too, how I've talked about this with my brother in the past, where when he kind of separated from the family a bit, but he had gone to war and it was very hard for him to feel understood by family because none of us had experienced or saw what he did, but his brothers in arms had.
Yes. Yep.
In a similar way where my family doesn't have the same experiences that you and I have had in working in the trenches and in home family therapy or in a therapy room with clients who have seen the worst parts of humanity.
Right. Yes. And I think that taps into a really important point that we'll talk about today, because I think this is a normal process for us, right? Like many of us show different versions of ourselves to different people in different settings, but the identities that we carry in those ways like have a specific purpose to us oftentimes. And so I think, it's exactly like you're saying, like when you look at why we would do that, a part of it is to belong, to feel like we have a group to belong to fit in, whether we're changing ourselves or whether we're knowing where we feel the more authentic connection coming from. It's often from people who we've experienced similar experiences with or gone through something together and just have this sort of shared language around things that other people would never understand. And so,
yes.
And it's tricky because I may have shared this before, but oftentimes in my last job, we've talked about working a lot, talking to people like at all hours of the night. One of the things that my husband would often say to me is like, he'd ask me how my day was and I'd come home and just be like, it was fine, or it was good, or here's this thing that happened. And then I'd get on the phone with you and we'd be like, blah, blah, blah. Oh my God, did you remember this thing? And we were like laughing, or we were like intensely talking about problems or whatever. Like it was very intense and like connected. And sometimes, and I know we've shared in this experience, like he would be like, well, when I'm asking you like what's going on, like you literally tell me nothing, or it's fine, or it was good. And then 5 minutes later, you're having like a wild therapy session on the phone about something that happened. Like, why are you talking about it? Like he was sort of feeling like left out, I think, from that side of me, that part of me. And he didn't really get to see it when I was at work, but like when we would talk outside of work, he would totally see what was going on and feel a little disconnected from it. And it was a big awareness for me to have that was something that I did, because I did feel like I couldn't translate all of what was going on into like, how could I even talk about this? How can I help you understand what I've been through today, when I'd have to start at like 0 to get here, and not that he doesn't know what I do, but like, it just felt like a huge lift. So it was so much easier to just be like, oh, you and I can process that together. And I'll just tell him things were great.
Well, or like I might have tried to have that conversation, but I wouldn't get the same feedback. Like there wouldn't be that mutual understanding or validation that I needed for something that was so significant and important to me.
Yes.
And it would ultimately end up feeling dismissive or invalidating, or
you don't get this.
Or I would end up feeling like I needed to defend the person that I was actually frustrated with because you didn't understand. And it almost felt like the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, so to speak, to kind of invite anyone else into that part of my world, because I didn't know how to translate, so to speak, as you're saying. And I could do shorthand with you or with other colleagues.
Yeah. Yep. Right. And so in that way, like the compartmentalization that we have, or what we do to have these sort of different identities, so to speak, is very adaptive, because it still helps us get our needs met sort of in the most efficient way possible. And I think one of the things I talk to my clients a lot about is the strength of this, like in childhood. Like kids do this absolutely. They're reading all the time, and they're knowing how they're supposed to show up based on how people respond to them, right? So they're constantly trying to understand what part of them belongs where and with who. They're looking to their peers, right? They're assessing that. And I think you see a lot of this like at young ages, but by adolescence for sure, kids are just really looking at like, who am I? How am I showing up? Who should I be showing up as right now? Rather than feeling that like authentic draw to just be themselves. But a big part of that is because the desire to belong and be a part of things and have your needs met in that way that feels reciprocal is so important. And so I think in adulthood, we still do the same thing. Like we sort of take that adaptation and bring it forward into our world.
I remember my older brother when we were living in Springfield, Mass, and he had created an adaptation and persona for himself where we lived there, and he didn't really feel like it was serving him anymore, but like he also didn't know how to reshape that as an adolescent in the same environment he was in with the peers and whatnot that he was in. And then my dad took a transfer promotion to Wisconsin, and my brother, I was devastated by this, but my brother was like, opportunity. I can totally reinvent myself and reshape who I want to be now without the baggage of who I thought I had to be when we were in Springfield. And he did, you know, but he took it as an opportunity because he didn't feel like he had to be in this box anymore, which I think it speaks to this of like how kids do that, but then kind of create opportunity to, he did at least, in that situation.
And it's so adaptive. And I think where we struggle later in life with that is when we keep those systems like fully in place for us, because just like any adaptation we have as children, right? I think this is the connection I talk with every client I have about is those adaptations that served us as kids generally don't serve us as adults anymore. Right. And a part of that is because the risk is you don't necessarily get to feel authentic all the time, or you don't take the risk, I think, to show up as your full self in any setting. And while there are the benefits of doing it this way, I think there's also just that cost that comes to both yourself and some of your relationships when we take that opportunity to show up as a different version of ourselves and sort of create this part of ourselves. But are we also then like essentially sending ourselves a message that these other parts of us are not worthy of being here or worthy of that friendship or connection, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So we can spend so much time adapting to different environments that we forget who we are when all the parts are together.
Exactly. And I think that's what leads to some of the disconnection we've talked about.
Yeah.
And because given the example we talked about with work and our husbands and like how we try to have that conversation, like part of the cost is that we're basically saying, oh, you're not going to be able to meet this need for me, and it's not going to feel as good as if I talk to this person, so I'm just not going to do it, and I'm going to take this over here. But then the cost in the relationship is like my husband's sort of like, why don't I get to know this part of you? Like, I think this is cool and exciting and I want to understand. And we're not necessarily like rumbling through the messiness of like, well, let me try to get you to understand where I am, or let me tell you if what you said was invalidating to me. Yeah. And that when I talk about this, I just need you to listen. I don't, right? Like we talked last time about going in and telling people what we need and not necessarily having them fix things for us, right? I think that dynamic leads us to shut parts of us down. And so when we don't lean into challenging that and practicing it, I think we send ourselves and others the message that I can't get this need met with you, so I'm just not going to try. And when really we may not be giving that an opportunity to actually learn how to do it together.
Well, and when I think about like my personal journey, and one of the things that has been so, in the spirit of this conversation, beneficial over this last year, I think the integration for me of all of my parts of like, I feel like I can bring my whole self to all my relationships now. That I'm not feeling like I have to censor my work side, my work part of me with my family, or, you know, like I can integrate all of that. And that has improved my relationships.
Same. And I think that's a part of this, right? Is understanding why you're doing what you're doing. And I think when you combine so many of the things that can contribute to that, right? High stress, burnout, these things we've talked about, like they impact connection. You're less likely to try to access that. And so I think by, at least for me, a lot of these changes have resulted in me feeling like I have the capacity to actually like rumble in that conversation or push a little more to say like, let me help you understand where I'm coming from with this, or like, I want to share this part of me with you. And I have the energy for that too, which is different.
Totally. Yeah. So when you think about the identities that we create to help us survive, like the good kid, the achiever, the helper, the caretaker, the peacemaker, the entertainer, the responsible one, they're roles that weren't developed by mistake. They're adaptations, right? And they always have served a purpose that helped us survive and belong. What role did you learn early in life?
This is such a cool overlap with the Enneagram, because that's what we're describing, and all we're talking about is quite literally how our, like, your Enneagram is developed, right? Oh, so everyone you named, right, each one of those I feel like represents one of the numbers.
100%, yes.
And we didn't go into this with that intention, but essentially, even in you asking that question, like, I know out of my childhood, like, that the peacemaker was exactly what my role was. And it was a strong role that I was in. I quite literally would want to sit down with my parents and my sister and like try to do family therapy with everybody, or make sure everybody was in a good spot, or comfort my sister when she was struggling and talk to her about how I think she could do it differently that might help the dynamic in the home. Like, I really just wanted everybody to be in a good space and be happy. And so because I believe, like, growing up for me, I was just a very, very sensitive kid. And so any type of conflict was very uncomfortable for me. Not everybody has that within them, right? Some people, the chaos and conflict is way more comfortable. I kind of believe it was like an innate thing in me kind of from birth, that it was just not something I have comfort with. Sure. And so my adaptation was always to try to, like, at all costs, make sure there was not an argument happening or people upset with each other. And I would do this, like, in my friend groups. Like, I literally remember in like 3rd grade, like, friends of mine would go and talk to the teacher like every day at recess. Like, instead of playing, we'd be like, okay, this person's fighting with this person and we need, you know, and they'd have to be like, just go play. Like, what are you doing? You're like 8 years old. But the group of friends I had, we were just seeking this like kind of funny connection around, like, you know, making sure we were all getting along or not mean to each other, help us figure this problem out that we have so we can be better friends. And so it was just this thing I felt very strongly about as a kid. And yeah, it was just an adaptation I've had for as early as I can remember, honestly.
Yeah. That's not surprising.
Yeah, that's sort of where it came from. Did you have the role that you were like really connected to when you were a kid that you think of?
I think the things that I think about, you know, we were an Irish Catholic family, so we always were kind of defined in roles. I was probably considered like the smart one. I was always academically astute, I guess. So I think that was something that I was really rewarded for a lot, was how well I did in school. And so achievement in that way was something that I was always lifted up for. So I always kind of strived for that. And then I think the other thing was birth order. Like, I'm the second oldest and the first girl. So I was very much a helper and was always sort of helping caretake for younger siblings and, you know, supporting my mom in any ways that I could.
The oldest daughter thing.
So, and I certainly looked for those accolades of being, you know, a helper in that way, which I don't know that that's necessarily a 7 thing, but.
I mean, I think you're very flexible is what it sounds like. You just named like several identities, I think, which is important. You know, like I feel like to me, that's where that would come in, is it's like you could adapt very easily. And I think that's a huge.
Yeah. I mean, I think I looked for where I was able to be needed and successful in any given place, and then go there.
Right. Yeah. Find your way there. No matter what, you could figure it out.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like that's sort of the underlying piece is like, you knew you could just figure it out. Cool.
Yes.
Yeah. And so what's interesting about this, right, and it's the same thing we've had in our Enneagram conversations, is that sometimes the thing that helped you belong may eventually become the thing that keeps you from being known.
Yes.
And so I still remember one of the first leadership trainings I ever did. I had to fill out this like personality assessment. And the thing that it told me was that I scored like the lowest in authenticity. I was devastated and felt like I had stabbed myself in the chest. I was so upset about it. And I was like, this is wrong. Like, I am authentic. I am myself. What are you talking about? But when you think of everything I described, like peacemaking and trying to help people get along and even this whole conversation about compartmentalizing, like that is such a 9 thing. You sort of blend into where you are and who you're with. And that's the cost of like trying to show up as the person who is helping other people or keeping things calm and chill, is like to not have your own opinion in a way, right? If you were to look at the cost of that, it's like, I don't think my opinion's as valuable as keeping everybody safe, keeping everybody calm. I don't need to put out there that I disagree with. Why would I do that? And therefore what happens is I don't get to be known as myself because I'm showing up in this other way all the time to try to just keep the peace.
I think you're very authentic now.
Thank you. I've had literally the day I heard that, I was like, absolutely not will I own this.
But I also think in that, like, you have evolved in challenging yourself to be more assertive and putting your opinions out there.
Mm-hmm. And I feel far more comfortable with it now. Like, I actually don't feel like it's that hard anymore. And it's taken work, but it was a big realization to recognize. But I think at that time, I absolutely was very much in this dynamic we're talking about. I was showing up certain ways. All my identities were sort of separate. I think even friends kind of knew me as a different person, or I'd have like my relationship with this person and my relationship with this person. Those could look very different, and I would be different. Like I could tell. And now I don't feel that way. I don't feel like I'm showing up in this very different way to anybody. Like I feel like it truly is more authentic. But I remember that experience and it was like, oh, I guess they're right.
Oh, this work is so humbling.
I know.
So have you ever read Michelle Obama's book, Becoming?
Yes.
Oh, so good.
So good.
And I love how she describes that, and that becoming is not arriving, and that there's no finished version of us, but it's a continual process of discovering ourselves, integrating ourselves, evolving across seasons, and reconnecting with parts we've left behind. And I love that. What do you think about that, reconnecting with parts we've left behind? Because I talk to clients a lot about that and that rediscovery.
Interesting. I love that. I don't know that I've thought a lot about that.
In some ways, it's like today you're thinking about your life in review and you're trying to heal some parts of yourself, right? And maybe you're thinking about your career that you're looking to end, and you're thinking about that you weren't as successful as you wanted to be, or maybe you were as successful as you wanted to be, and you kind of rewind the tape a little bit and you think back to like who you were at that time. And I think when you look back at that person with the wisdom that you have today, and think about like that person and the information that she had at that time and the knowledge that she was operating with and the decisions that she was making at that time, and maybe some of the decisions that she made that weren't necessarily the best decisions for her, but that you've sort of been frustrated by, and figuring out how to forgive yourself for, or offer yourself grace, recognizing that like you did the best you could. So it's sort of like that. I think there's other times too where when I'm at a healthier place in my life and I look back at different memories, I see it through a different lens. And I'm like, oh. And I think about it like the Inside Out 2 video, when I think it's the hockey scene in one video, it's like super toxic and negative and like she thinks it's all bad. And then when she's in a healthier state, it's very different and much happy, And so I think our memories certainly are reflective of our emotional state.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that when we reconnect with different parts of ourselves based on our health and emotional state at the time also can help us evolve and heal.
I talk with clients about parts in some of the themes of like internal family systems work when we think of ourselves in terms of parts. And so I think what's cool about that and what you're describing is exactly the experience I have had with people who oftentimes in that work, one of the hallmark pieces is to have like curiosity and compassion for your parts when most of the time there's a lot of negative emotion because we feel embarrassed for that teenager version who did that thing. We're like, oh, how did I ever, why did I do that back then? I have this memory, and that emotion you're talking about is so tied to it, and it paints a picture of what happened. And then we sort of shut that down. We disconnect from it because it's uncomfortable and we feel shame, whatever it is. And so when we can then sort of look back through a compassionate lens or a curious lens of like, I wonder what that part of me was doing then, or I wonder what that version of me was actually trying to accomplish, or why that was happening. And you can see it from today. You shift the narrative enough that you can then reshape what that memory was.
Yes, with the wisdom and knowledge that you have today.
Yes.
And it does change like almost the neurosynapses of the memory. And it's very healing and restorative. And it does help you have compassion for that version of yourself. And many people think that healing means becoming someone different. But I feel like healing really means creating different understanding. And having compassion.
Yes, for yourself. And certainly in other relationships too, depending on who you're working with. But I think the healing comes in when we can have that compassion towards ourselves.
And fully become yourself and integrate and allow yourself to be fully seen and not feel like you have to hide parts of yourself because you're ashamed or embarrassed.
Right. And that doesn't mean we're changing who we are. It's reconnecting to who you've always been underneath those adaptations.
So a lot of people feel like if I heal, my relationship should get better. And sometimes they do. Sometimes they change. Sometimes they deepen. But sometimes they no longer fit. And I think that's when it gets really hard.
Yes.
Because as we become more integrated, we stop people pleasing. We communicate more honestly. You become more authentic. Right? We set boundaries. We ask for things differently. With more honesty and integrity. We tolerate less misalignment. I think that's a huge thing.
Yes.
And the relationships around us have to adjust. Because our self-worth has adjusted. Our egos have strengthened. And I think that that's when there becomes tension in the relationships if our partners haven't necessarily adjusted to.
Right. Because we are sort of showing up as, even though we know it's our true authentic self we're returning to.
Right.
Some people may not know us as that person, right? And so they're used to this version of us that shows up a certain way, or they've gotten to know us as the person you've shown up as with that person. And so you may know internally, I've been doing healing, this is my true authentic self, but to the outside, it could look like you're doing things totally differently now, or you're responding in a way that was never what you used to do.
Right.
And so all of a sudden, the person who's done some healing feels disconnected, and like this other person might not meet their needs anymore. And that person is also having to adapt and understand sort of who this quote unquote new version of you is, even if it feels more aligned for you.
And then you, as the person that's healing, feels like you're doing something wrong.
Right. Is this even worth it? Should I have done this? Am I doing too much? Am I expecting too much? That people will come along with me on this journey. I'm making the choice to do this differently now, but it's making things harder in some areas of my life.
And these people have been with me this whole time. And am I being disloyal for not just keeping on maintaining status quo?
Yep, exactly.
Maybe I don't deserve this better, newer version of myself.
Yeah. Or it's selfish of me to try to live into this because maybe it was good enough before.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Those are certainly some things that I hear in the therapy room.
Mm-hmm.
And one theme throughout Michelle Obama's Becoming is allowing yourself to grow without abandoning your history. But the challenge becomes what happens when the version of you built a relationship is no longer the version of you showing up in it.
Yes.
So have you ever noticed a friendship changing because you changed?
Yeah. I definitely think so. I've had a lot of friendships change over the years. I reflect back on my friendships, and I'm the kind of person that in each phase of my life, I sort of had like a really close, intimate friend, like a best friend type thing, right? So I have like my best friend from growing up. I went to college and made my next best friend. Mm-hmm. I went to grad school and made my next best friend. I went to work and made my next best friend, you know?
Right.
It's like, and while all of those relationships have been really special to me and unique and different than each other, none of them are exactly the same. They've definitely transformed over time, and some of them have maintained really close. Some of them have gotten much more distant just with time or with physical distance. So I think while that speaks to things changing with time, I guess where the part of me comes in is I think so what was changing about me is proximity and physical connection with people, like being around them all the time. And that is like a security thing for me. Like, right, it feels like that's when I do crave like those very more one-to-one relationships with people, more so than like a lot of acquaintances or a lot of pretty good friends. But I will say because of that, I think my capacity to connect with many people all at the same time, right now that it's like I have friends from all these phases of my life, maintaining that is hard for me. And so I would say what changes is as I've taken on new responsibilities in my life, become a mother, whatever these roles I've taken on that have been added into my life since I've made those friends, it definitely impacts how I show up and the energy I have to show up. So I think as a result of that, there are some friendships that fell away a bit during different phases of my life when people weren't as in the same phase of life as me or going through the same things I was. And then they've since come back in some places, and in some we sort of have drifted apart more often than not from then to now. And so I would say that's the piece of change that I would see is that as I've had to adapt my role in life and be more myself in as many of those scenarios as possible, my energy to give to all the relationships feels hard.
Well, and one of the things that I've noticed when I think about the evolution for me in terms of like what I've stopped needing from people.
Yes.
I think previously in a more insecure place of my life, I needed more validation. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I need that as much anymore.
Interesting.
Yeah. I feel more secure in my relationships and in myself, that I don't feel like I need as much of that feedback to feel secure. Because similarly to you, like, you know, I have some friends that are my dearest friends that I talk to once a year. Mm-hmm. But I know that if I needed them, they would instantly be there.
I think when we notice ourselves changing, it's important to think about that, like what's affecting our relationships and what's shifted, right? That's why it was hard for me to answer the question, I think, at first, because it has to do with like when I'm looking at what I've changed. I think thinking of it from the lens of what you need less of does help, because I will say, like, even in some of those distant friendships, like I don't need that proximity to maintain connection, and I'll still reach out, right? So like when we talk about social snacking, like I have no problem on a random day being like, oh, I was thinking of you. You know, I did that with my friend from grad school who lives across the country. And I was like, oh, she just popped into my head and I haven't talked to her. And we maybe text a few times a year, you know, but we were super, super close for a number of years. And, you know, we can do that and we can check in, but I can still hold her as a very good friend, but I don't need the level of connection I had or the proximity or the amount of connection that I needed in the past. And I think when you're talking about the validation, like that's a piece of that.
But many of us swing between extremes. And what I mean by that are self-sufficiency.
Okay.
I don't need anyone, often rooted in protection, independence, disappointment, self-reliance.
Yep.
Codependence. I need you to regulate me. Often rooted in fear, insecurity, or survival patterns.
Yep.
And then there's the authentic connection, which the healthy connection says, I can stand on my own and I can let you stand beside me. Mm. And I feel like, that's where we strive for. But I think we can, depending on where you are on the spectrum, and I think we can all fall somewhere in between at different points in our life. When does support become dependence?
I think support becomes dependence when we start to doubt our capacity to handle things ourselves, right? So when you think of the intersection of self-sufficiency, like that flow makes total sense to me. And I love that that's like how we're how we're crafting this conversation, because I think I can easily identify these different stages, like especially from like motherhood on, right? Sure. I think a lot of us and a lot of women plow into self-sufficiency as mothers.
Yes.
I and not everybody does that, but a lot of people are, I think it's innate in us because we're having a child. And so we go headstrong into like, I can figure all of this out. And it's almost a necessity because we're learning an entirely new role that like survival of our child depends on. So I think there's a lot of pressure to feel like you have to do it all, and that you could do it alone, kind of a thing. And then I think the next phase is sort of, how do I then let go of some of the things I just do myself, because I kind of want a little bit of control over how it goes and I want to do it myself, but I now need to rely on someone else for this. And so where I think it flips into dependence is, for me, I think I sometimes convince myself, like, in order for me to let go of something that I've been doing myself for so long, I have to shut that part of me off and give it to someone else entirely. And I think you run the risk of developing dependence there because you sort of disconnect from your capacity to do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that is how I would answer that question. I think it's the support that, I think in an authentic connection, when you need support, it's like being direct and saying, hey, I need this from you. Like, I need this type of support right now, or I'm struggling with this. And it takes vulnerability. I think a more dependent stance is to present it in, I hate this word needy, but like a needier way. Like, it's not like, I could be doing this myself and I know that, but it would be really great to have your support with this. And I'm noticing I'm struggling, versus like, I can't go on doing this anymore. I've hit my breaking point. You have to take this from me, and I'm done. And now I'm depending on you to do this. And I see that pattern a lot with people because it feels so all or nothing. Like I have to reach my limit before I'm willing to give it up or give that responsibility over to someone else and trust them. And then I need to go all in on trusting and not really have the flexibility of mind to know that it's okay to ask for that support sooner and not be needing it so much, like for survival.
Right. So the healthy interdependence looks like knowing your limits and on both sides, and recognizing that it's okay to stand alone, but it's also healthy to say, I'm exhausted right now. Can you take the reins on this for a minute? I can take it back after I've rested.
Yes.
Self-sufficiency protects us from disappointment, and connection asks us to risk that.
Yes, exactly. Exactly it.
Yeah. So as we reconnect with ourselves, we often want different things, not necessarily more relationships, but just different relationships. Earlier versions of ourselves often wanted approval, validation, fitting in, being liked, being needed, which I think is so present in your early 20s.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't that speak to you?
100%. Yes.
Yeah. Teens, 20s, maybe some 30s. And then our more integrated versions want honesty, reciprocity, depth, consistency, emotional safety, shared values, authenticity. And one of the things that I was recently talking to someone about was moving away from, like, you can be in a healthy relationship but not have shared values, and how important shared values are to move towards contentment. And I think contentment is more important than happiness, because happiness, I think, is an emotion that can be fleeting. Like, I don't think we all stay in a state of happiness at any, I think.
Right. There's like more stability with contentment.
Way more stability with contentment. And I think that it's very challenging to find contentment with a partner that has conflicting values with you, so that you may have a healthy relationship with someone, but if you have misaligned values, it's going to be very hard to find contentment in the relationship.
Yeah, going forward. Yeah, for sure.
And so, but I think that it's hard to let go of relationships that feel healthy, even when the values are misaligned, because there's fear of, is there someone else out there for me?
And the unknown is scary. And I think, like we talked about, when you end up living into that authenticity, there is often that fear that I might be asking too much of people.
Yeah.
If I know I've changed and that therefore this is going to shift things in my relationship, like, should I even be exploring this? And I think that's a very big stuck point for a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think what's so important about all of what we talked about today and this last piece we're talking about with values is when we link back to Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, she talks about becoming as an ongoing process rather than a destination. And maybe the same is true for our relationships, that the goal isn't finding people who fit who we used to be, but the goal is finding people who can grow alongside who we are becoming.
I love that. So our takeaways. Loneliness isn't about being alone. Sometimes it's about not feeling known. Compartmentalization can help us survive, but eventually we need places where more of ourselves can exist together. The roles that helped us belong can also keep us hidden. Many of us learn to show only the parts of ourselves that felt acceptable. Healing is often a process of integration, not becoming someone new, but becoming more fully yourself. As we change, our relationships often change too. Growth can deepen connection, reveal misalignment, and invite new forms of relationship. Self-sufficiency and connection are not opposites. Healthy relationships allow for both independence and support. Authentic connection requires authenticity first. It's hard for people to know us if we're constantly managing which pieces they get to see. Healing often changes what we need from relationships. As we become more connected to ourselves, we begin asking for honesty, depth, reciprocity, and safety. So over the next couple weeks, maybe have a few social snacks and think about which parts you're still learning to welcome back. And welcome that part of yourself back with kindness and compassion.
I'm going to try.
Me too.
We're going to do it. We'll have a great couple weeks. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.